Good evening, everyone. Good morning. Very happy to hear. And we've got a very interesting webinar in store for you today, discussing a topic which is pretty relevant in today's world. Give you an overview of how the clinical trials process is executed and what are the key challenges today that we encounter in getting something to market. And a lot of data reconciliation, a lot of latencies. How can we help speed up the process? And we'll do that in context of an overall life sciences landscape that we'll also outline. After that, we'll give you a quick overview of how we could solve some of those problems using smart contracts and optionally a blockchain. And we'll dig into that architecture a little bit and what that business process could look like. And as we always do, we'll also, just to keep it real and practical, we'll end with a demo of an actual clinical trial process built on smart contracts and running to show you how the various bottlenecks in the clinical trial process can be addressed. The demo has been built by our partner, Brilio, and Lakshmi is going to be outlining that. We'll obviously keep the session pretty interactive, so feel free to post your questions in the Q&A chat. I'll keep monitoring it, and I'll post them to Corey and Lakshmi as we go along. And that brings me to introducing our panelists for the day. So first off, Lakshmi Shastri, she's the principal architect at Brilio. Lakshmi, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Manish. Hi, everyone. I'm a principal architect in Brilio, and I have been with Brilio since its inception. I'm primarily a technologist experienced in providing digital transformation, architecture, and solution strategies. I'm into technology consulting and solution engineering for enterprise initiatives. We're using emerging technologies such as cloud, big data, blockchain, IoT, and machine learning. So we try to bring customer value creation and also elevate their efficiency models. I'm engaged to more than a decade with life sciences companies with the rich pharma experience and know-how of clinical trial process and understand its ways of working. So constantly we are trying to bring the best of solution mapping to customer needs and also thereby ensuring impact on businesses. Uh, just to introduce a little bit on Brilio. Brilio is a born digital company. So we focus more on delivering design-led solutions for our customers. We do everything with the product DNA mindset with Agile. And as a result, we help customers to go to market faster and accelerating what matters faster for them now. And we also have more of outcome driven portfolio and innovative market related solutions so that we are enabled with world class design, technology, consulting, and thought leadership. We are primarily a business partner who can bring situational fluency, who can be focused on methods, and who can lead with a product mindset and wired for agility, speed, and precision. We are located headquartered in Silicon Valley, and we have 18 plus offices all around the globe, and we have trusted leading brands with whom we have been associated with a lot of our enterprise architects, data scientists, uh, platform developers, and design thinkers.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Thank you so
Manish.
much, Lakshmi. Yeah, looking forward to the discussion today. And now I'd like to introduce my colleague, Corey Todaro from Digital Asset. Corey?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Corey Todaro. I'm the senior product manager for healthcare at Digital Asset. I work primarily in the health for or with the healthcare industry, our clients from healthcare, whether that's health systems, intermediaries around the claims infrastructure or data infrastructure, insurance companies, life sciences and pharmaceuticals as well, and help them adapt and bring Daml technology to their solution sets to solve distinct problems that face healthcare enterprises. DA or Digital Asset is the creator of Daml, Daml is both a language and a technology stack to enable enterprises to run what we call cross-enterprise or multi-party applications within a framework of trust, within a framework of privacy, and greater efficiency. So we can redesign multi-party workflows to remove manual breaks, inefficient handoffs, or out-of-band workflows to improve efficiency and value creation for enterprises. In the healthcare space, that's primarily around a number of multi-party workflows, which present real challenges for enterprises. On the healthcare delivery side, that could be everything from care coordination around new payment models, how we jointly take financial risk around the outcome of a course of care. There's lots of inefficiencies, of course, in the claims and payment and financial infrastructure around healthcare, with receivable and remittance dates extending out to 30 days, 45 days, lots of manual reconciliation taking place. Anywhere we have multi-parties who have to manually reconcile or do manual handoffs within a workflow, Daml can provide a technology neutral and a technology agnostic solution for that problem, redesigning the workflow and enabling enterprises to deploy it on infrastructure that could be centralized databases, or it could be fully distributed blockchains and distributed ledgers. So it allows enterprises to configure a full multi-party stack while maintaining privacy, security, regulatory requirements, and efficiency.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you, Corey. Thank you, Corey, for that overview. And just for people, just as we go forward, while we are also, helping to bring Daml and connected networks to enterprises and consortiums who want to work together on one network, ultimately the end vision is also to allow multiple different networks to interoperate with each other. And you'll see some of that as we go forward. So Lakshmi, why don't you begin by speaking about a few technology trends that you're seeing, and then we could get into the life sciences landscape, and then, to set the context and then zoom into the clinical trials process.
Yeah, thanks, Manish. So we are seeing these superpower technologies influencing business across industries. So digital transformation is an overall strategy which requires a strong foundation of these emerging technologies. So these technologies are not just for compromising on the cost, but it is also more for re-establishing long-term sustainabilities, and also ensuring we have outstanding customer experiences, and also to bring in interoperability between various different purpose-built systems. So that's where we see a lot of regulations and compliance needs are also asking for more and more transparency while dealing with sensitive information. So we also, as we go forward, we also see how we are leveraging, as Corey mentioned, digital asset markup language, which is a vendor agnostic platform which supports multiple different databases and distributed ledgers, which helps us to leverage their existing investments as well as build new capabilities into these solutions and bring to market faster solutions, which can focus much more on future-proofing these solutions, at the same time addressing the data visibility and transparency and security aspects. So moving forward, we also see how this digital and transformation is impacting across industry. And life sciences sector is one of the key where there are a lot of digital opportunities that can be unleashed across various different life cycle. While we have been working with various different customers, we have engaged in their drug development, engaged with their patient enrollment, and also build trust in their supply chain end-to-end visibility of tracking and traceability, and also help reshape some of their business models to add more values. To one of our large pharma client, we have built a way of classification of chest X-rays, where we could help to identify diseases using machine learning algorithms and custom-built algorithms, where we could generate a lot of different standard APIs to interact with multiple different systems. So these hybrid algorithms help to detect a lot of patterns, and that thereby it helped to detect whether a chest X-ray had a disease, particular disease or not, whether there are a lot of identified diseases. We had around 14 diseases to be identified in this chest X-rays. So that primarily had a huge impact on our whole life cycle, so that it helped doctors primarily to reduce this time that was required to generate these reports, to identify the diagnosis, and it helped almost to bring down their 60% of effort in report generation. At the same time, it also helped them to automate this patient report generation with much more confidence in the data, given that it had end-to-end visibility and auditing capabilities as well. So preventing any kind of false diagnosis. In other scenarios where we have brought in life sciences to quote as an example, so there were smart labs which were taking lots of images of protein crystallization. We using deep CNN algorithms, we try to bring in and reduce the effort spent by the crystallographer in analyzing these images and tracking the various different protein crystallization stages. So that way it helped us to label this better and take only the valid compositions going forward, to ensure that these compositions were good enough for produce the different results that was expected. So this is how adopting more of a holistic strategy is helps life sciences better, so that they can focus on more end-to-end transformation, right from drug discovery to managing their clinical trials and getting their regulatory reviews and approvals on time, reducing the whole workflow length and duration through automation, and also bring that visibility into manufacturing, distribution, and keeping the required dimensions and parameters in place using digital technologies. Today, we are going to focus more on clinical trials, how the digital transformation and the digital technology helps to bring in a lot more efficiency into this whole process. So we also see that clinical trial process has multiple intermediaries involved, and generally this clinical trial process, right from patients to sponsors and regulators to secondary research organization, it requires a lot of complicated data sharing sequences. So that's where we try to bring in a lot of manual process to automation, the disparate systems where it is in siloed in nature to interoperate, and also have more of this sensitive information to be shared. But it also requires the required amount of transparencies. So that's where we try to bring in a connected and consistent digital experience across the data flows and the end-to-end process, which primarily gets a API as a digital glue, which ties in all these existing systems, which are purpose built and which has been leveraged by the industry. So at the same time, we are also able to build an innovative layer over and above this to bring that differentiation, and also to future-proof these solutions that help them to handle any unforeseen needs or the constantly changing and evolving regulatory and compliance requirements. So that's where we also can build a lot more tailored customer experience and views. And coming to the data part, which is the most crucial in protecting this sensitive data. So that's where we can leverage technologies like blockchain, which helps to bring in this transparency, privacy, and traceability aspects into whole life sciences process. So this is a fundamental shift where the core processes of drug research and development and increased patient safety all can be met at the same time. There is a drastic reduction in the overall length of the clinical trial process by itself. We can also ensure leveraging blockchain and digital asset markup language together to have more of focus on developing the business logic and less of focus on infrastructure and how to set this whole network for blockchain. So everything gets embedded and abstracted with these technologies. So blockchain is expected to improve the whole validity and as well as patient recruitment and retention and enrollment. And we also see how different players or intermediaries in clinical trial process are exchanging different types of data, starting from sponsor requesting for regulatory approval, where he has some of the key information with respect to the drug, with respect to the physical composition, and with respect to various different regulatory aspects that he is going to cover. And uh, all that is embedded as part of the sponsor initiating the regulatory process for feasibility authorization. Once the regulator provides that authorization, so next, the CRO would primarily ensure he agrees to the feasibility assessment, does his work from his side to give a go ahead with all the intellectual property and rights protection. At the same time, have the various scope of services and orders, billing and invoice payments, and how to get various different hospitals, chain of hospitals onboarded onto this clinical trial process. So that's where he starts building this whole administration aspects. Here is where we see multiple different data systems coming into play, which can primarily be leveraged, still be leveraged as a clinical trial management system or health record management system. But over and above that, how we can help to have our own version of data to be viewed by each different intermediary. So which is still guaranteeing primarily the logical data separation and ensuring that end-to-end visibility of the data and who is altering what part of the data and who is allowed to uh, tamper or modify or upgrade some of this data. All that visibility brings in the required transparency. At the same time, it also helps us to leverage smart contracts, which help to integrate this data and not having to share everything, because blockchain block, which contains the real-time list of records with timestamp and hash, helps us to verify different provenance and ensure that the chain of transaction is unaltered. So this is more a resistant to any kind of modification of data, keeping track of end-to-end transactions, and also having a open or closed membership to the chain, and ensuring also the privacy aspect that is very much critical in clinical trial process.
Yeah, so Lakshmi, yeah, go ahead, Corey.
I was just going to echo Lakshmi. Of course, this is a very complex set of multiple workflows in this section of the healthcare industry, and I just want to point out a couple of things that we think is a unique value proposition of Daml in enabling partners like Brilio and enterprises to build out their solution sets. And the first is the nature of the language itself. And Lakshmi had mentioned how Daml enables you to focus purely on the business process. And when you write applications in Daml, you're not only defining the data model, which is very standard in software, but you're also at the same time also defining the authorization structures and the entitlement structures around that data model. And so Daml combines that such that you are guaranteed and know very easily who's allowed to see what data, who's allowed to change what data. And so that even though there may be multiple participants utilizing the software, the controls around authorization and entitlement are very tight. The second important factor around Daml is one that's very common now as the healthcare industry becomes more familiar with blockchain technology, and that is privacy and control of the data. Of course, siloization in healthcare limits where data can go. And that's proper given the regulatory constraints and the privacy concerns around the nature of this information. However, many blockchain infrastructures are overly broad in terms of where data is stored and who's allowed to see data. And what Daml provides uniquely is a configurable, a range of configurable options, such that data is only stored on certain nodes, in certain locations, in certain principalities or geographical locations, as well as who's allowed to see what data, such that we can not only control who can see the data, but we can also control where the data is stored. And because Daml is ledger agnostic, being operable with a wide variety of protocols from Hyperledger Fabric to R3's Corda, Sawtooth, VMware blockchain, etc. It provides the enterprises the appropriate infrastructure to meet their specific regulatory needs and concerns for their industry, and not just a one-size-fits-all approach with a lot of blockchain protocols, which then requires a lot of additional architectural work to try to undo some of the oversharing that many blockchain protocols offer.
Yeah. Thanks, Corey. I just wanted to add a couple of things there. So obviously, as you can see on the slide here, you're not limited to or dependent on one blockchain protocol. So you can start with your application and the business workflow, and then without having to decide which blockchain to deploy it on, and depending on your privacy requirements and data sharing protocols, you could obviously select the right blockchain that you want to deploy on. Corey, just one thing, if you could highlight also, I think Lakshmi touched upon it a little bit, but it might be helpful to clarify that. In a blockchain-based network, we are not expecting each of these different parties to share a common blockchain, share data on a common blockchain, right? They can still have the data private and segregated.
Sure. I refer to it as the blockchain broadcast model. Based upon a lot of the cryptocurrency protocols, many blockchains offer what I call the broadcast model. And that is when a party executes a transaction, they broadcast that transaction to all the nodes in the network. And if we can think of nodes as representing different parties running their own node within the network, every node contains a record of every single transaction. And that's necessary in some blockchain protocols to achieve consensus, to make sure that we're all in sync with each other, that all transactions are globally valid, and we have transactional integrity. That's where we see a lot of the privacy concerns in healthcare come up around blockchain. There is data that we cannot share with all the parties. There are regulations which enforce where the data is stored physically, geographically. I can't store certain medical data outside the bounds of a given geopolitical entity. So that might be a particular German state, for example. The healthcare data that's generated there needs to be stored there. And if I'm participating in a multi-node network, that becomes almost impossible to achieve. What Daml enables us to do is to store on your node only transactions to which you are a party, or only transactions to which you've been granted some sort of observer rights to see pieces of the data. Perhaps the whole transaction, perhaps part of the transaction, perhaps only a change or a choice that's exercised by one of the other parties. All of that is defined in the code itself. And it's defined quite concisely, such that we can meet the unique regulatory and privacy requirements of the healthcare industry without having to develop architectural workarounds around privacy. And we're seeing a lot of that work take place today around a lot of the large blockchain protocols. Is we have to undo some of the overly broad sharing that's taking place that's inherent to the protocol itself. With Daml layer sitting between the application and the persistence layer, or the ledger itself, we can achieve levels of privacy far more easily and faster than is feasible on just what I'll call the regular protocols themselves. If you were to use, for example, Hyperledger Fabric chain code or Sawtooth, for example, you'll have to account for privacy, and that is often a very painful exercise to try to adapt the protocol to the needs of the industry. Daml meets the needs of the industry as a first order step, which enables a lot more utility and a faster time to market for your application and solution.
Yeah, perfect. And I think one of the examples, Corey, was, companies might obviously use an over-the-counter or a purpose-built clinical trials platform, but often data has to be sent to that platform, and at the end of the trial or during the middle of the trial, aggregated data has to be received from the platform back into the pharma's infrastructure where they can do the analytics. And often this back and forth of data, which is being packaged and sent from one platform to the other as a batch process, often needs a lot of reconciliation, a lot of matching before it can be used. So using infrastructure like Daml on a blockchain, for example, could definitely alleviate that, because you're no longer sending data back and forth. You're logically accessing the same data set, even though the data set is physically segregated at different places.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the other side of the coin. Excuse me. When we use architectures that are built on either messaging specifications, or even if we use a clinical trial platform itself that doesn't ensure interoperability or seamless, unbreakable workflows with all of the parties necessary. I'm aware that it's not just one data transfer that takes place. It's a constant data transfer that takes place between CROs and the operators of the trials and the sponsors themselves. Now, I understand that data often comes in drips and drabs. And many companies and manufacturers and sponsors face the problem of we're receiving data constantly, but that data is not indexed necessarily. We're not sure what data we're receiving. We're not sure if part of it is repetitive, if it's entirely repetitive from a batch that ran a day ago, 2 days ago. And so it places the burden, a lot of additional administrative burden on all the parties to ensure that we've received all of the data, that we don't have repetitive data, that we don't have data that needs to be excluded from the final regulatory submission because of consent changes or protocol changes in the trial itself. And so managing all this data simply using messaging specifications, it can be a real challenge. And what we see with sort of purpose-built platforms is that they're really designed for one or two of the parties. They're not designed for all of the parties, or they're not capable of accommodating to the needs of all the parties who might be involved in the interactions around clinical trial execution and development. And that's where smart contracts are really the game-changing technology to accelerate that process, because we can define very precisely interactions between all of those parties, and not just simply serve the needs of one of the parties.
Yeah. And just one more point I wanted to highlight that Lakshmi outlined when she was defining the overall life sciences value chain. There are obviously going to be many third-party or many custom applications that have been built, which do very purpose-built specific things, and you may want to integrate all of that with this new infrastructure that you're setting up. And that's what this diagram depicts as well. These blue small boxes below each of the parties represent those custom applications and software that may be in use at any of these parties. And each of that, that software can easily be integrated with the smart contract-based multi-party distributed platform, so that we don't have silos. So I think that's very important to say, that you're not ripping and replacing everything that you have, but you're taking what you have and you're taking a hard look at it, and then moving the right workflows over to your smart contract-based platform, so that different parties can access, common data, but still, segregated according to their privacy requirements. With that, let me see. I think there's a question that has come up. So Corey, I think this, I'm not sure if you're aware of this. This question has come up, says, how can Daml impact SDTM and ADAM standards? Are you aware of those?
Apologies, I was on mute. Standards are a common question that come up when in any sub-vertical in almost any industry. There are defined messaging standards and data specifications. And how does Daml accommodate that? And Daml accommodates it quite well. What we do is we build a translation and integration to represent the required data model within the payload of a Daml contract. And it's something that we've done many times before through one of the many integration interfaces that the Daml stack offers. Daml stack offers a very robust JSON API, but we also have what we call a gRPC interface, which allows us to specify and build bridges between those messaging specs and data specifications and the Daml contracts themselves. It's something that we've done in financial services industries quite extensively, whether that's Swift messaging integration or using the common domain model for derivatives and swaps. In healthcare, there's active work going on right now around HL7 FHIR specifications, X12 messaging specifications, integrating in with Daml contracts so that we can have an input of one data standard and an output of another messaging spec on the other side of the ledger workflow there. So with STDM and Adam, and I'm not an expert, I don't work in those standards. I'm familiar with them as being a participant and a veteran in the healthcare industry, although my experience is on the healthcare delivery side, rather on the life sciences side. Building those integrations is not a challenge, and Daml is designed to accommodate these kinds of messaging and data specifications that are required within specific industries.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Corey. Lakshmi, I'm unable to pull up the Q&A panel. Are you able to see? I see one question has come up. Can you see what that is?
It is the question on STDM and Adam.
Okay, the same one. Okay,
yeah,
got it. Yes. Okay, so I think that's so. Let's move on now to the demo. And before we do that, let's quickly look at the overall architecture of what this landscape might look like. Lakshmi, do you want to elaborate a little bit on this?
Yeah, thanks, Manish. So here we are briefly touching upon a clinical trial process, how we are going to leverage digital asset markup language, primarily to build a full stack Daml application. So using Daml is also helping us to build this much faster, this multi-party application, also ensuring that we bring in a lot of focus on the business logic, and this can also empower the business domain experts to rapidly create this, given that it is all based on Daml models and contract framework, which is well defined for workflows and authorizations. So this also helps us to primarily have these multiple parties exchange the information. Here we can define them as signatories, observers. Signatories are authorized to perform and create new contracts, and observers primarily can see what changes are happening to these contracts and ledgers. And it also has the two core concepts addressed very well, that is authorization and privacy part, which was elaborately touched upon by Corey and Manish. So our solution is primarily hosted on Azure. It can also leverage various different Azure platform native services to ensure the web scale, and also to bring in lot of various additional functionalities for patient enrollment, or being it reward to patients, so that they can come back and ensure this end-to-end process is completed as per the plan and as per the schedule. So that's where this also helps to bring that coordination by leveraging the platform and various different capabilities of the platform. It also ensures there is a logical separation of the data, but also integrates very well. For example, Daml has connector for Postgres database, which also helps to bring in that connectivity with existing storage, as well as build a new storage with Daml ledgers. So that way we can still leverage existing purpose-built applications which are being adopted by various different parties. At the same time, bring in this data standardization and consolidation layer through smart contracts, which primarily helps to exchange the information and still have that privacy and transparency addressed through this contract data. So we also have been leveraging Microsoft's open source confident consortium framework, which leverages trusted execution environment. This also brings in a lot of various challenges that we see, some of them related to the latency, performance, and it helps to address high transaction throughputs, ensuring it has the same speed, and while maintaining the quality of data, it also ensures there is a lot more governance capabilities built into this blockchain framework with multi-party application builders as well, coming into the common framework adoption and bringing that standardization. So here is where we see how the demo is going to cover the business process. We start primarily with the sponsor initiating a clinical trial. While he is initiating the clinical trial, he generally request the regulator to uh, uh, provide authorization to start the clinical trial process by providing all the required documents and the information that is necessary to start with the clinical trial process. Once the regulator gives a go ahead on this, next is the step of the sponsor or the pharma company reaches out to clinical research organizations who are capable of conducting these clinical trials. So there is a list of standard operating procedures they need to adhere to, and also ensure the intellectual property is being protected, and at the same time all the enrollments that has been happening, that information is protected, and the privacy is maintained. So that's where the trial brochure gets the feasibility assessment happens, and the trial brochure gets circulated to various different chain of hospitals who are having this patient enrollment to conduct this particular kind of clinical trials. Once that invitation is sent to various different hospitals and also the research coordinators, that's where these participants are participating and taking those drugs and ensuring that symptoms are being recorded, so that in this COVID situations, they are also enabled to do this recording of symptoms at their convenience at home. So that's where authorization needs to happen from the hospital, because they have to strictly adhere to some of the standard protocols and some of the medical devices that needs to be leveraged while doing this test, so which can be enabled through video. At the same time, the symptoms can be recorded, which goes untampered but gets authorized through the hospital. And also there can be visits to hospital to again as a follow-up and as a continuation while it is feasible. So this whole solution enables patients to log their symptoms, hospitals to also record the symptoms, generate these reports, and share these reports for approval again back to regulator, and also ensure the final closure of this end-to-end process. So let's
Yeah.
take a look at the demo.
Yeah. So Lakshmi, just before you do that, just a couple of quick things. So obviously Lakshmi touched upon some of the new age patient engagement, digital engagement tools and methodologies that are coming up. All of them, of course, sit on top of the platform that Lakshmi is going to show you. So each of them can be integrated seamlessly into, they are inputs into this foundational collaboration, platform that is being shown today. And the other thing I wanted to highlight, and you'll see as we go through the demo, is that this filtered and aggregated data that is being sent to various parties. This it's not that all of this data resides in a single database and people have different views on it. It's that the data, the individual patient level information is available at the provider, for example, and that and it automatically gets filtered as it gets sent to the CRO, and gets further filtered as it gets to the sponsor, because you may not want each of the individual patient health information to be shared with the pharma, for example. So things like those are automatically filtered by the smart contracts and a distributed ledger technology supported platform.
It's something we call sub-transactional
Yeah.
privacy, such
Exactly.
that there are pieces of data within a transaction that can be preferentially shared with observers with certain rights. But the whole entirety of the transaction, the entirety of the data is not necessarily shared or stored elsewhere.
Exactly. Yeah. And while the process is executing, the typical process is, the sponsor is getting all the information, they'll aggregate all this information, clean all the data, do some analysis, and finally prepare a trial report that will be shared shared with the regulator for approval. What the smart contracts and distributed ledger technology environment allows you to do is to output that report as a consequence of you executing the business process. So there's no tack on tack on steps that need to happen, for data aggregation and consolidation. So you'll see some of that during the demo. All right, Lakshmi. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I think there are a couple of questions. So we'll take those, and then you can start sharing, and we can get into the demo.
Sure.
Okay, so let me just look at the questions. Okay, so the first question is, this is a great conversation about the solution. However, using this approach for clinical trials would require all the participants to engage. This is a big paradigm shift. So Corey, I can start taking this and then you can build on it. So, this solution can be incrementally rolled out. So for example, if we mentioned the regulator automatically being a party on the platform. However, when you start rolling out the platform, you may not get the actual regulator to be on the, pick up a node and be on this new solution platform that we've launched. So what typically we would do is create a logical node for the regulator, with that role of the regulator being played by, for example, an internal party like a compliance department or a regulatory reporting department, which is automatically getting all this information, and then they are sending it over via the required channels to the regulator. It still simplifies a lot of operations, but you don't actually get the physical regulator on the physical network. So you simulate that logical play.
Yeah, I would just add that Daml is what we call an extensible solution set. So we can write Daml templates to define specific workflows. And of course, the slides we've been showing are many, many, many workflows. Often enterprises will go to something that is, for lack of a better word, low-hanging fruit in terms of efficiency and value, and build out a very small Daml solution there. We can add parties, we can add adjacent workflows seamlessly without redesigning those core templates. There may be workflows or Daml templates which are only affecting two of the parties, for example, and such that the other parties don't even have to be aware that those workflows even exist within the solution. And so Daml offers you the opportunity to start and extend beyond it without having to pre-configure and pre-organize the entire industry to come together around a common single solution and technology. And that way it's incredibly flexible. Also, importantly, with reference to an earlier slide that Manish showed, the parties don't even have to be necessarily running the same blockchain infrastructure behind the scenes. Daml can enable interoperability between Daml solutions that work on Fabric and Daml solutions that work on VMware blockchain or Sawtooth, for example, such that, again, we don't have to start with organizing a consortium, building governance, making sure everyone's on the same page before we can even begin to build the solution set. We can start in the same way that all enterprise software projects begin, which is, I want to generate value, I want to solve this specific business problem, and then we can see where it grows. And it might grow in a lot of different directions, but Daml doesn't close off any of those avenues. And so for partners like Brilio, I think it offers a fantastic opportunity to solve the problem we have now without foreclosing future avenues.
Exactly. And, just to add to that, Ken, Daml runs on different blockchain platforms, as Corey covered, but Daml also runs on databases. If you're on Azure or AWS or, any other, cloud platform, you could start streamlining your internal workflows using smart contracts to avoid all of the data reconciliation that happens within your enterprise. And then you could connect that later on to the blockchain network that you might set up. And that also could be set up incrementally. So if you're using a clinical trials platform today, you could just set up a simple network between the platform and between the, between the enterprise, and then expand as we go along. So yeah, let's get into the demo now. Lakshmi, why don't you share your screen?
So this is a demo, more of a framework demonstration rather than the actual application. But to answer some of the questions that are there, so I'll just show you how multiple parties need not have to be on the same system, but still exchange information through this blockchain ledger. So first, let us log in as the sponsor who is trying to initiate a clinical trial process. So he is primarily submitting a proposal to the regulator, where he can start choosing. Because we have already onboarded the regulators, I'm not going to that step of onboarding, and we are saying for which clinical trial we are starting this clinical trial process. And once we have shared this information with the regulator, this proposal is submitted to a regulator who can take a look at it. He will get notified because of various different additional functionalities that can be built into this system. We can leverage other API integration into different notification mechanisms. And when we come here, primarily the regulator is being asked to authorize a particular trial. He can get access to various different documents which are stored in different systems, but through this blockchain ledger as a hash algorithm that is stored, which is referencing to those documents which are still residing on the existing systems and which are not on the network to manage the privacy and the protection of the data.
Yeah,
Once the
quickly,
regulator
Lakshmi,
is
sorry,
yeah.
just on that. So the documents, could you touch upon that a little bit? Obviously, the documents don't all need to be on the blockchain, but they could be on any, all of the participants' secure platforms as they need to be. And only a reference to that, to those documents can be stored on the blockchain. So we don't need to actually store all of the personal information on the blockchain. The other question that just came up is about, not everybody needs to be onboarded to the blockchain, but how do you get them to input data into the blockchain? And I can, you can drill down a little bit more into that, but the question is from Viral. And I think that this whole platform that you are seeing demoed now is working on a concept of, it's a web-based application, of course, and it connects via REST APIs, to the underlying blockchain ledger, if you've been configured as a party on that. So even if don't have a physical node on it, you could be configured as a party, and you could be accessing it, as a party on the network, even though you don't actually have a node. So I think that's one of the easiest ways to get people who don't want to install a blockchain, stuff, and set up a network, or be manage a network, an easy way for participants to be onboarded on the network. Go ahead, Lakshmi.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. So, as earlier Manish was touching upon, these regulators need not have to be external parties. They can be their internal organizations also who are handling this compliance and the regulatory needs. So that's where within the network they can be onboarded, or it can be as well a separate network if it is external party. So once the regulator has authorized this trial, again the sponsor is next going to share this with CRO for feasibility assessment. So once the sponsor has come here, he is able to see this pharma clinical trial that has been initiated, has been approved and authorized. So next he is going to invite the CROs, and because CROs are already onboarded, now he is going to propose to start this clinical trial process, and he can onboard any number of CROs who are onboarded into this platform, and primarily give a ID for this whole clinical trial process. So we can say, for example, give a particular ID just to identify this whole transaction. In the background, we can see different transactions getting registered and the ledger getting updated with this whole process. Next, we can log in as a CRO here, and he will be able to do the feasibility assessment and give his approval to conduct the clinical trial process. So he primarily represents with his authorization to go ahead with this feasibility, and he will be able to next invite the coordinator once again the sponsor primarily ensures and primarily looks into the proposed trials that has been accepted. Sorry, I think the CRO needs to primarily do this next step of authorizing this clinical trial. So we can see various different process that is being there, and he can invite the coordinator to conduct the next. So we are seeing how multiple different parties are being coordinated together into this platform, and all are giving different kind of permission levels to modify certain information, and what information is being seen by different parties are not visible to every different party that is involved in this transaction, which is ensuring the uh, data protection as well, and at the same time maintaining that visibility aspect. So once the CRO has approved and he has invited the coordinator, next the coordinator would get onboarded, and he would primarily see. Okay, I think I missed one part. Sorry.
So while you're doing that, Lakshmi, there's another
Yeah.
question from Viral. Says that feels like an app, and this is shared between different participants with permissioned controls. What advantages does blockchain bring to this? So I think that's the fundamental difference. Like with payments, if you're following all the uh, innovations that are happening in the payment space, ultimately the idea is that the rails, the actual payments are going to fade in the background with customer experience taking the front end. Even though the entire infrastructure in the back end is going to be operated differently, the customers and consumers are not going to feel any different. So I think that's exactly that here. Even though you see everybody accessing the same front end, the infrastructure at the back end that is orchestrating all of this is completely different from a traditional from the way we traditionally do it. At the back of this front end that you're seeing, there is no centralized database. All of this is being coordinated across multiple different private stores, which are maintained by each of these various parties, that are accessing the system. So, while you saw that, the sponsor is sending an approval, request for approval to the regulator, that even though it's happening on the same front end, the data is actually going from the sponsor to the regulator, but everybody else on that platform, the CROs and the medical providers and the coordinators, everybody else has no clue, and they have no access at all, no physical or logical access to that infrastructure, to that data. And
I think
they
that
are
that
they are
raises an interesting question about what an application is.
Yeah.
It's who's running that application. Daml can be used to run centralized applications where the entire stack and logical application is being offered by a single party.
Yeah.
Daml can also be used to run fully distributed applications where there is no central party operating and there is no centralized data store. So it's configurable to different trust parameters and trust requirements, which are usually non-functional requirements for a solution set. The value of blockchain would be it is no single party's application themselves. There is no single party who has access to all the information. And indeed, you do not depend on any single party for the operation of the solution set. All you need are two independent parties, whether that's within an enterprise or across enterprise boundaries, to want to coordinate in this manner.
Yeah. And obviously, you might need an operator. So the pharma in this case, or a consortium of multiple pharmas, or even the regulator themselves, or even a third-party CRO, they could be the owner or operator of this network, but they only have access to operate the network. They don't have any access to the physical data or anything that else that is being shared.
There's a
So hope that answers the question, and
yeah.
we can
A lot
definitely
of
get to
different
that
options
after.
there.
Yeah, and we can definitely explain this in a little bit more detail offline.
Yeah. So
Lakshmi, you ready?
before we end, I'm just touching upon how this whole Daml model primarily is built as a framework, which is easy to implement and faster to build a solution. So this is how various different parties are getting onboarded. We can see primarily the Genesis contract being created at the first place, which initiates this whole setup. So once we have this setup, that's where we can start this whole clinical trial network with various different parties. So we can see the signatory, we can see the operator, and we can also see how the non-consuming regulator has to keep that contract active to ensure that he gets to operate on the end-to-end life cycle of this clinical trial. So we also see how different templates are onboarding different parties, because clinical trial approval request, which requires regulator and which requires the sponsor who needs to initiate these activities. So each different template carries different operator and regulator and the various different clinical trial process info, based on which the whole permission levels get set, and the ability to alter this information or update and share some of the information with other parties gets enabled.
Yeah. So thanks, Lakshmi. And as you can see, everybody, I think the smart contract model is simpler because obviously, as you can see, even though this looks like code, if you pay close attention, you'll be able to understand every single line of code that is written here. It's just primarily the business process that is being fed into the smart contracts layer. So that's, I think, one of the other advantages, and you can get up to speed, get to market pretty quickly with the solution and then refine it from there. Doesn't have anything to do with encryption, data storage, authorization checks, etc. All of that is taken care by the underlying smart contracts runtime powered by Daml. So yeah, let me. So with that, I think Lakshmi, do you have anything else to show on the demo?
I think at a high level, I covered all the aspects, but this is how I just wanted to report on the symptoms, how the patient can submit symptoms from his own facility, being at home or at his convenience. So if he provides some of the symptoms and the dosage that is being taken, for example, say 10 grams. And he is also recording when this symptom happened to him. And once he has done this, submit the symptoms. So next, the clinical trial hospital, which had started this whole process, it can also log in and primarily look at the symptom that has been already recorded by Bob, and it has to authorize before it accepts, given that it has to adhere to some of the standards. Once it authorizes, it can see symptoms, whatever was registered by Bob. At the same time, even Alice, who was also a participant in this clinical trial, she can register her symptoms either coming to hospital or again at her convenience. So once she has accepted the invitation, next she can record her symptoms.
Yeah, and all of this information is with the provider, and obviously the way we've configured it right now is none of this information is accessible by the CRO, because obviously the CRO's physical data store is different. And the pharma's data store is different. But of course, if you want to share some of this information, individual patient level information with the CRO or the pharma, that can obviously be coded into the platform or configured accordingly.
Yeah.
Great.
So even he can authorize Alice symptoms, and now this provides a complete visibility onto various different symptoms registered by different participants in this clinical trial, which gives a consolidated view of that. At the same time, people who come visiting the hospital, it allows the participants to record these symptoms as well. So once all these symptoms are recorded, then it can be primarily sent to the CRO, who can generate these reports and submit it back in progress trial. So he is able to see this and prepare report.
And what you're really seeing here on the front end are the instantiations of what we call Daml templates. I see there's a question there: what prevents participants from creating a contract? Contract forms and contract types are defined on a per party basis, such that it would be impossible for a party to create a new style contract without the other party or without the operator's consent, for example, such that the way the parties interact are prescribed by the Daml templates, which of course can be updated, etc. But it prevents, there's a variety of patterns to build in checks as well, so that all data transfers require, for example, sponsor approval before they can be executed. And so it becomes a multi-signature kind of contract, which before it can be executed has to have the buy-in of all the parties. But that's a great question, but it gets way down into the weeds on how Daml templates are constructed.
So
Yeah,
this is
and as you can see, I think, yeah, the rights and obligations are automatically defined, so while Lakshmi is pressing these buttons on the front end and logging in as a specific party, the developers and the system doesn't actually need to do any explicit authorization checks, because all of that is done by the smart contract. So it won't allow anybody other than next gen pharma in this case, for example, to exercise the action that Lakshmi is taking on the web end. So that's also a big difference from the way traditional authorizations have been done. Okay.
Yeah, I think this brings us into the whole
so you're closing
process.
the trial? Okay.
Yeah, I'm closing the trial, and now the sponsor can close because he has received the regulator acceptance as well. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, great. Yeah, and obviously this is deployed on Azure, but it can be deployed on any platform, of choice. Yeah, and configured as required. So Lakshmi, let me share the summary. Let me share my screen. The next steps, obviously, learn more about Daml for healthcare, and there were some excellent questions that came up on this webinar. We'll probably, create some content around that and get in touch with you to explain those a little bit better. Probably also write a blog post on that. And of course, connect with Brilio and explore the Daml partnership and the Daml expertise they have. We'll be sending you this presentation as well as this recording. So yeah, thank you very much. And Corey, any last minute, any closing comments?
I know there are many questions, and this is a complex area. So thank you for the time today. If there are additional questions, I encourage you to reach out. Would love to explore this particular case or adjacent cases across the healthcare industry with you. And thank you so much to Lakshmi and our partner Brilio for showing what can be done with Daml. And so I know there are questions out there about will there be forthcoming innovations, standard integrations, etc. We would love to explore those topics with you and with Brilio. So please reach out.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you, Lakshmi. Any closing comments, Lakshmi?
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for being through this session and making us enabled with this webinar. Thanks, Manish and Corey as well for showcasing this solution in your as part of Daml webinars.
Yeah, no, thank you, Lakshmi. Thank you. Excellent demo. And obviously, thank you for all the insights of both the life sciences life cycle as well as, the nitty-gritties of the clinical trials process. So that's it, folks. Hopefully, all of you, it was informative and helpful to all of you. Like I said, we'll be sharing the recording. We'll also make the demo available as make a demo available to you. And you can obviously, I'll include contact information as well. And you can reach out and then schedule one-on-one discussions if you have to. Thank you very much.